This is episode 24 of the second season of the Exit Philosophy podcast. Rich Griffin, Scott MacArthur. It is Monday, June the 17th, 2024. Hope you had a wonderful Father's Day. And before we get into the baseball talk, the Blue Jays enter tonight's series that begins at home against the Boston Red Sox, 4.5 games behind the suddenly red-hot Minnesota Twins for the third and final wildcard spot in the American League. A little anniversary, Griff. 30 years ago today, the OJ Simpson Bronco chase.
Wow.
June 17th, 1994, Game 6 of the NBA Finals, Houston Rockets, New York Knicks at Madison Square Garden. NBC does the split screen following the Bronco while also broadcasting the basketball game. And I sent some texts out to people in my life, and as you know, my dad was the CFO of Skydome at the time, and his response was Phil Collins concert at the Skydome. Yeah. So I guess Phil Collins was playing Skydome 30 years ago tonight as well. And I texted our buddy Arash Madani that because he and I will sometimes do anniversary dates for significant moments, particularly in sports, and he goes, "We old." And we are old.
Yeah, there are about 10 or 12 moments in history that I remember exactly where I was and what was happening. And that was one of them because it was so unusual and momentous as sporting hero. I was in Felipe Alou's office. He was doing a post game after whatever, another June game in the Expos season. And the reporters were all in front of Felipe's desk. And this is where I learned about bad reporting. Like, don't be the first to report something. I turned to the group and I said, OJ Simpson just shot himself in a Bronco, because that was a rumor that was there. Somebody said, we believe that OJ has shot himself. And so, of course, without checking any facts, which bad reporters do, I just turned. But I was a PR guy. What did I know? And I told the group that, and then had to take it all back when the Bronco arrived at his home in Bel Air or whatever it was.
Yeah, because there were reports he was armed, right?
Yeah,
you know, and suicidal. I was thinking as you were saying you were in Felipe Alou's office, Griff, after another ... June game, and I don't mean to open up old sores, but probably another ... June win. Because that was the 1994 Expos team that, of course, didn't get the chance to compete in the playoffs, and maybe there would still be baseball in Montreal if the strike hadn't have killed the season.
Oh, I know for sure there would have been. But yeah, I forgot which season it was. But another moment I remember is when the verdict was read. I was driving to Cleveland for a playoff game. I was a reporter by this time for the Star. And I pulled into a Wendy's. And every time I drive along I-90, I see that Wendy's and I think of OJ, which is not the breakfast juice of choice, but it is a moment in history. And like I said, there's about a dozen of them I can't get out of my mind. And those are two of them right there. Anyway, let's get on to baseball.
Yeah, and it was October 3rd, 95. The verdict came down, and that was a slightly shortened 1995 season because the strike didn't settle until like March something, and so they didn't start the season until mid to late April. That Cleveland team, Griff, won 100 games out of 144.
Yeah.
And then lost the World Series to Atlanta. That was Bobby Cox's World Series championship.
And that was the Atlanta's only chance because, and I've told you in the past, I was there when the Native American elders put a curse on the Braves and said, you will never win a World Series unless you get rid of the tomahawk chop, Chief Nakahoma, and the name the Braves. And damn, they played in 95 against the Indians, who were just as politically incorrect. So somebody had to win. But that's the Braves' only chance until, I guess, all those elders died and they won a few years ago. But
no, there you have it. So let's get to the topics du jour. And you and I, we had a very lively, do we call it a green room chat? I mean, we're on Zoom here, but we usually visit for a half hour or so before the show, and we want to get to that. But let's start with the Canadian Baseball Hall of Fame induction weekend. I saw some highlights, Griff. I've read some things. It all seems like it went down wonderfully. Very emotional. Russell Martin, so you can see what this honor means to him. Our mutual friend Buck Martinez winning the Jack Graney Award and giving a wonderful speech and telling some really cool stories about how his wife Arlene is essentially responsible for the way his last 40 years professionally have gone. It's like, you're not playing anymore after 1986. Take this broadcasting job that Paul Beeston wants you to have. But usually a great weekend, and it seems like it was again.
Yeah, I would recommend it to anyone with young family, boys or girls who play baseball, and the girls are included because we know that it's becoming a thing. Ashley Stevenson was the first woman inducted this year for her contributions to baseball on the field, not just as a support of some kind. And that was tremendous, to hear her speech. It was impassioned and advocating what we're talking about, young women being able to play at a preparatory level and a national level. There's just that one level, the women's national team, and to get there, you have to make it on your own, So that was a great speech. I use that weekend, and I recommend it to families interested in baseball and the history of baseball in Canada. It's a great little town, St. Mary's. I use it every year. I bring my daughter in from Ottawa, and we make it a father-daughter weekend. And so there was a golf tournament on Friday, which was tremendous. A lot of players and celebrities in that tournament. And then the Saturday ceremony, which Rod Black did a tremendous job of handling, of course. That was one of my favorite moments of the summer when he was being interviewed, when Tyler Black got a base hit up the middle, and he called the play as he was being interviewed by one of the Bally failures. But
the Bally failures. I love that.
There was Jimmy Key wasn't able to make it, but he went in deservedly. Paul Godfrey gave his speech about, I think he started when he was born and then worked his way through. But the key
at his age, Griff, that would take a while now. So I'm just glad you're here and available to do the podcast today.
A key part of that speech was him recalling how in Vancouver in an exhibition series in, I think it was 84, I know that the Expos were one of the 4 teams that were invited to play at the end of spring training, and how Buck Martinez suggested to him that the players don't want to play indoors. So you build a dome stadium, it better have a roof that comes off. The word retractable wasn't invented yet. So, so I recall that story because when Paul Godfrey named Buck Martinez the Blue Jays manager after the 2000 season, he used that story. He said, well, one of the reasons that Buck is here, and I went, oh my God, this isn't a good reason to name a guy a manager, is that he suggested a retractable roof for the stadium. And I had asked Buck, when's the last time you've been in a major league clubhouse prior to March 1st when the network sends you down? And he went, probably when I played. And I went, oh, this isn't going to work out too well. But it was a great weekend. And to me, it had so much of a Canadian feel because Howie Burney was recognized, and he's been for probably 60-some years contributing to the GTA baseball and the national Canadian amateur baseball scene. Rod Heisler, left-hander, who thought the 84 Olympic team was being inducted, not just him, but he was being inducted because he has been on 13 national teams representing Canada, and that was worthy of recognition. So there was a lot of Canadiana there, more than usual, but it was tremendous, and I would recommend it next year for anyone who has young boys or girls who want to go down.
Well put, well said. I have a thought about Buck, but remind me, Griff, because I think it's a
preamble thought.
It's a topic for a future episode. So if I open the door now, we're going to go for 10 minutes, and then will look and be like, geez, we didn't get to half of what we wanted to talk about, and we're already at an hour and 15 minutes. How much more can we ask of the good listener?
And there's a lot to talk about. Yeah.
Let's get into the Blue Jays here. So a game under 500, 4.5 back of the suddenly red hot Minnesota Twins, who've won 5 in a row for the third and final wildcard spot in the American League East. It's, again, to date stamp this, time check it. It's Monday, June the 17th. The 3-game home series against the Boston Red Sox begins tonight at Rogers Center, and then the Jays will flip it and play both the Guardians and the Red Sox on the road on their next trip. So they'll see a lot of these two teams going forward. From a results perspective, good weekend. You lose the first one, you look impotent on offense doing so, and people are going, oh, geez. But you bounce back. And your offense actually, especially Sunday, just given how it played out late, wins you the game. Every add-on run in Sunday's game mattered. So that's the results from a 30,000-foot point of view, Griff. The philosophy, not the exit philosophy, the day-to-day strategic game planning philosophy has clearly been overhauled here. It's more than just Biggio and Vogelbach out, Horwitz and Barger in. It is strategy. We're giving everything a go here. We're getting more aggressive.
I do believe that there has been an internal 180 turnaround in terms of how this team is put together, and aggressiveness. We're talking, I mean, how often have we all seen a hit and run that either didn't work because there was a foul ball, or it turned into a steal because the batter swung and missed, whatever. But there's action on the bases. This Blue Jays team is doing things on the bases. We've seen more bunting, and we can talk about your specific gripe in that regard. But we've also seen straight steals. And I looked up stats, and you know, I'm sure that the Blue Jays, among their 20 people in that back room, have looked up the same stats. But I was telling you before we went on to record here that the top 10 teams in stolen bases, and stolen bases have always been undervalued because if you're caught, you're giving away outs. And, you know, that's what the Moneyball people say. We're not stealing, blah, blah. But the top 10 stolen base teams, there's 4 division leaders, and there's plus 45 wins above 500 among the 10 teams. Meanwhile, you go to the bottom 10, among which the Blue Jays are included, but also the Yankees are included. But you go to the bottom 10, and there's 21 games under 500. So there's got to be a correlation between all the new rules, the teams that have taken advantage already going into the season and have decided that need to be younger and more aggressive, and the fact that the Blue Jays all of a sudden are starting to do more of those things, changing their roster with Kevin Biggio gone to make room, and with Daniel Vogelbach finally and mercifully gone to make room, because he was a 2 bench player. You know, if you're going to be aggressive and he gets on base, you need to run for him so you can be aggressive. So he was using up half of your 4-man bench. Anyway, that is the observation. And those are the numbers to back up the reason why they're being more aggressive. And they have a core from Buffalo, 4 guys from Buffalo who play the game that way. I mean, we saw Addison Barger steal a base, and he didn't even do that at Buffalo, but he stole it on Sunday, I believe. So they're doing different things very subtly, but very noticeably becoming more aggressive.
Yeah. So my question, and we can't answer it today, and I suppose it can be the question about anything in the sport of baseball, anything in life, has to do with the sustainability of this approach with this personnel. That answer will come, because games are going to get played almost every day between now and the end of September, and we'll see how it all shakes out. My attitude at this point is roll with this for as long as it works. And part of how it's going to continue to work is that Spencer Horwitz is going to continue to look like a bona fide major league hitter. Addison Barger is going to continue to find his way. You mentioned Barger stealing a base, didn't do that in Buffalo. I mean, he was playing left field earlier this year in Kansas City, having not done that in Buffalo. So you talk about asking a young player with not a lot of major league experience to do things at the highest level that he's not accustomed to doing. And I know he misplayed a ball in Kansas City and whatever, but generally succeeding or showing you what he's made of when he succeeds and even when there's a bad play, these are all little increments along the way that can mold a young, good major league ball player. And Griff, at least with what they have, they are trying to do things differently because it wasn't working. And so from that perspective, lest I be dubbed constantly the negative guy who just craps on everybody, they deserve credit for pivoting and trying out new players, different philosophies, different approaches to try to scratch out runs, because sitting around and waiting for home runs wasn't working. Funny enough, they hit some bombs this weekend against a Cleveland team that's typically hitting the home runs, but those can come in waves. So we'll just see how it goes.
Yeah, on exit philosophy, we've been advocates, or I've been an advocate. I forget whether we argue about it, but of bringing younger players up, younger, more talented players. And that was before realizing that the difference in the game for 30 plus hitters, 30-year-old plus hitters, is the 98 to 102 relievers. That at that age group, your savvy, your ability to understand how to play the game doesn't come into effect as much as young reflexes, young hand-eye coordination. And because of that, we're willing to live with young mistakes. And like Addison Barger, again, tagging up at second base and heading back to the bases as Vlad's ball to center field bounced 1 foot under the yellow line. And for the longest single, where people who didn't see the game are going to go, well, Vlad, 3 hits and they're all singles. Well, wait a second. He had runners on first and second, came up and hit one almost out of the ballpark. In fact, it was longer than Varsho's grand slam, the next hitter, and he didn't get anything out of it except a single, moving runners to second and third. But that's a Barger mistake that he won't make again, and that I said earlier, so it would not be right for me to say that he's not ready to play in the big leagues, because I've been advocating bring guys up and have them learn at the big league level, and that was a learning moment. But further to that, what do you think about the fact that this change in philosophy of aggressiveness and the fact that there's so much mediocrity in the game, and 2 or 3 of the mediocre teams are going to have a good second half? There's 14 teams between 2 over and 6 under, and the Jays are 1 under 500 moving into the Red Sox series. So what do you think if the Blue Jays get to the point where they go, okay, we now understand we have to be more aggressive at the trade deadline? Let's bring in 1 or 2 players that have those aspects to their game, like a Jazz Chisholm. Miami's ready to deal by the deadline. So instead of saying, are the Jays going to be sellers, or are they going to be sort of renovating not the stadium but their roster? Are they going to be Reno Kings? And I'm thinking that maybe they're even thinking that way. And if this team, as it is heading to the deadline, can tread water, maybe move up a little, get up over 500 and stay there, there's a chance that they could be buyers at the deadline.
Sure, it's possible. Yeah, and I understand you talk about that large clump of mediocrity. The only teams that matter outside of the Blue Jays and their own performance are the clubs in between the Blue Jays and that coveted final wild card spot. right? Because there's a lot of mediocrity in the National League too, and that, from a standings perspective, doesn't affect the Blue Jays. You're right about it affecting the trade deadline because everybody's going to be in play at the trade deadline as a buyer or a seller. Some teams may be louder than others, whatever the case may be. I do think, Griff, I mean, you have to be living under a rock to not be aware that this front office isn't popular and has lost a lot of the confidence of the fan base. Now, that's not necessarily reflected in attendance. I know attendance is slightly down this year over last, but it's not like this.
Was over 40,000.
Yeah, it's Father's Day, but it's not like this precipitous drop from like 35,000 to 16. You know, it's not like 13 into 14 where everybody bought tickets for the 2013 team thinking they were going to be good after the Marlins and Mets trades, and then 2014 was a bit of a popcorn fart because everybody felt burned by the 2013 group, right? It's not like that.
We've also discussed the fact that this ownership group and this front office group cannot afford to sell.
Well, yeah, but
plus, what are you going to get from anyone? Because if there's this move towards aggressive baseball, what are you going to get at the trade deadline for Justin Turner, for George Springer, for people that you don't want as part of your aggressive young team moving forward? When everybody is on the same page, when everybody's thinking the same thing, what are you going to get that's going to help you either this year or in the immediate future?
Right. And ownership, you know, whoever that is, whether it's the chairperson, whether it's somebody on the board of directors who's half paying attention, would look at it and say, so we have a $246 million player payroll. What's going on? Like, the payroll has never been higher. And it's been in this stratosphere for a few years now. But, like, you know, Griff, you and I were both covering the team 10 years ago where the so-called passing of the hat happened, where guys like Jose Bautista were willing to take deferrals on that year's salary so that Alex Anthopoulos could pool some money together to take a run at Irvin Santana. Like,
yeah,
you know, like we're living in a different world now 10 years later.
Well, that's funny you mentioned that, because one of the things that I learned on the weekend in St. Mary's from someone who's been around the Major League game for a long time is that Alex Anthopoulos is continuing to do that in Atlanta. He's using the deferral system for existing players in order to promise that he can bring in players that's going to help put him over the top. So, you know,
but there's a difference between deferring money in a contract negotiation and then signing
this is a contract that's already signed.
So he's still doing that.
Yeah,
where it's like, hey, we'll pay you this at $20 million in 2040 when you're 50.
Right.
Interesting.
Apparently, and allegedly, from a source.
Well, we know where Alex learned it, if that in fact is happening. And we also know why he hoarded some money and kept the team under budget in 2015 so that he could go to work leading up to the trade deadline. And
there's no arguing with his success or Dave Dombrowski's success.
No.
There's a lot of GMs, and you don't question their methods. You just look at the madness that ensues when they win. And this team needs to either learn from that or create their own method of reaching the promised land.
Right. So, but again, my point: $246 million payroll. You just cannot be an under 500 team in your 9th season as a front office and expect no blowback. I mean, maybe in that company you can, but you shouldn't.
But in baseball, and I agree 100% with you there. But in baseball, with no salary cap, you can make tough decisions, like with Justin Turner. Either, send him home, tell him, because it's a 1-year deal, right, with Justin Turner,
and it's 13, so it's
so you can
13 million.
You just don't fit into our plan. After exhausting all avenues of getting him somewhere else, and you might have to end up moving him and then paying most of the remaining salary, which is fine because there's no cap, and they obviously were ready, willing, and able to be at the level of total team salary that they're at. So It's not like a fire sale or anything like
Right,
that.
but it's not just that; it's that they're also paying into the luxury tax, right? So
Yeah,
they are
I mean,
helping
they
to
knew
prop.
that didn't sneak up on them.
No, it didn't sneak up on them, but they are paying into it, and they have a right to expect results. And
Oh,
so I would,
hell yeah,
so I
yeah.
would think, that there may be an aggression from a typically reticent front office, and then the fine line is going to be not panicking, identifying needs and making the right moves. And so we'll see how it plays out. And I still think,
So
Griff,
not panicking, like having a master plan where Barrios pitches to 13 hitters in a must-win game, like that kind of not panicking.
thank you for bringing that back up. If you're watching on youtube.com/@exitphilosophy, I'm getting the facial tics and starting to swat at my eyes again. It's like that just will never go away. I wasn't actually thinking that when I talked about it. But I want to bring something up, Griff, a specific play from Saturday's game. Now the Blue Jays won. And I am not trolling. Okay. But when I bring this up, I admit I'm going to piss off the process humpers and the small ball fanatics at the same time. But it is a reminder when you're having exit velocity and other advanced metrics jammed into your ear holes to explain, yeah, they're not playing well, but, at least they're hitting the ball hard or whatever, that it goes both ways. Jays are up 2-0 early in the game on Saturday afternoon. You were at the Hall of Fame induction ceremony in St. Mary's, so you were not the victim of my text thread. Another mutual friend of ours was and happened to agree with me. But let's lay it out. First and second, nobody out. Jays are already up 2-0 in the game. So off to a nice start. Carlos Carrasco, who may have been born while Jesus was still building houses, was on the mound for Cleveland. And, so this is not Bieber's hurt, but this is not Tanner Bybee. This isn't Blake Lively's brother. This is Carlos Carrasco, but not the Carlos Carrasco of a decade ago. And so you've got first and second, nobody out, and Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, the 8-hole hitter up. You're up 2-0. They lay down a bunt. So it's a sacrifice bunt. Kiner-Falefa successfully achieves the task. Runners at second and third, 1 out for the 9-hole hitter, Kevin Kiermaier. I'm screaming at the TV by this point, so this is not hindsight. And I'm saying, I hear a lot about process. I need to hear the explanation of the process that would have you intentionally create an out with Isaiah Kiner-Falefa to get to Kevin Kiermaier, who is objectively one of the worst hitters in baseball this year, worse than George Springer. What does Kiermaier do with second and third, 1 out? He strikes out and does so on the final strike, swinging over a pitch that got dirted. Now it's second and third, 2 outs. Back to the top of the order, Spencer Horwitz, base hit to left field, cashes in the run from third. And the result, Horwitz's single, scoring the run, bails out bad process. And so small ball, aggression, I get all of it. I'm here for a change in philosophy because this is not a team that can just rely on the home run, Griff. They've shown that last year, shown that this year, but you cannot tell me it's good process to intentionally create an out in advance of Kevin Kiermaier's plate appearance.
Yeah, and I will say that they might still be learning how to maximize their aggressiveness by the formulation of a lineup, because I think it was said before, or I might have written something about the lineup on griffsthatpitch.com, but it was that ideally, if it's Horowitz, then IKF, you could bunt at that point, but not because that would set you up second and third with Vlad and whoever's batting fourth, Bo, and then further down the lineup. But to do it when IKF's batting eighth seems counterproductive and silly because you're not even working the count. You know, you talk about Carrasco, you could have got him out by grinding an at bat instead of bunting on a first pitch. And now you're into a bullpen that's a really good bullpen. But we saw the flaws on Saturday and Sunday from some of their middle relievers. You know, I wouldn't want to get to Clase the same way that I wouldn't want to get to the guy in Oakland, the same way that I wouldn't want to get to a lot of major league closers. But it's the soft underbelly of middle relief that the IKF bunt sort of, and like you said, they got away with it. But the managerial gaffe that still sticks with me, and I think it was after we recorded the last time, was when they threw through and with runners on first and third, they threw through, and IKF was trying to cut the throw from Alejandro Kirk and come to the plate. They had a 2-0 lead, and Chad Green on the mound with 2 outs. So you pump, you throw to third, you do whatever, but you don't throw through and make that play because it shows disrespect for your pitcher, who you obviously saying can't get out of that jam if there's runners on second and third, and 2 out. There was 2 outs. So what happens? He bounces it. The runner scores, so it's called a double steal, and then they score the tying run, and it goes to extras, I believe. But you know, there's just if you're going to play aggressive small ball baseball at times, you have to understand it. You can't just say, okay, this guy bunts when he's batting eighth ahead of Kiermaier. You can't just say, okay, we like to throw through and cut and come to the plate when the situation says don't do it. You can't bring out your starting pitcher after 13 batters when you got to win not only that game, but the next game in order to advance to the next round. So this front office, this coaching staff may still be learning what they are advancing towards in terms of changing up the style of play. And I think this crowd, this fan base would enjoy a controlled, aggressive brand of baseball, not what they're playing right now.
Yeah. And I'll say this, Griff, for the weekend series against Cleveland. Number one, they won a series against a good team, against a playoff team in the American League. So they deserve credit for that. I mean, we've gone on and on about, oh, well, you know, they made some hay against the White Sox and all that. No, well, now there's some good teams on the schedule and they won a series. They deserve credit for that. And even if they had lost, now, had they lost Sunday, it would have been devastating how it happened. And we will get to Jimmy Garcia in a moment here, but it was an enjoyable game to watch. And Saturday's was too, not just because the home team won, but because there was some offense. And if you've got to be scrappy, but you know what scrappy is? It's also, there's activity. Stuff's happening. Stuff's happening on the field. Stuff's catching my eye. Somebody's bluffing a lead off of first base, threatening to go to second. They didn't get their timing right on that. So okay, next pitch, then they take off because they lock something down and they like there's some. So there's an enjoyability that I felt this weekend that really has lacked so far this season. And there is value in that too, because as a diehard NFL fan, for as much as I love defense and as much as some of the pass interference penalties and roughing the quarterback penalties piss me off, it is on the roughing the passer angle in particular about protecting the quarterback, player protection, but it is also about offense and ensuring that offense happens. Things happen. And we've heard a lot this year about how the collective OPS of Major League Baseball is below 700 and it hasn't been this low in a long time and blah, blah, blah. This sport right now has issues with activity during games with offense in general. And so when stuff is happening, it catches your eye, it engages you more, and regardless of result, you walk away feeling like you didn't waste 2.5 hours watching guys flail at 101-mile-an-hour fastballs.
Yeah, so I mean, what you're talking about is of having things happening on the field, on the bases. So it's the time has passed for us, for anyone to be comparing this to the 2015 and 2016 Blue Jays, because that's not going to happen again. You know, it's not going to happen anywhere in the game. Those numbers, those numbers for the 30-team major league aggregate are sinking. So it makes sense that the Blue Jays are, but this team is not in a bubble where fans can go look at the diminishing numbers on offense that this team has. You got to look at the entire industry, and which brings us back to that they have to change. I don't think they realized they had to change so much because of the success they had hitting in what years was it? 21, 22, that and with Vlad,
particularly
and
21.
Yeah.
With Semien and
Yeah.
Springer in his
yeah, for
first
sure.
year.
That was the year.
Springer was hurt a bit, but he had a good year when he played.
It's taken this front office a little time. We'll see if they're able to adjust. They've begun the adjustment by changing the roster and bringing up some of the young, more aggressive Buffalo Bisons. And you know, the Vogelback dismissal, we've been saying that since spring training, that this guy doesn't belong on this team. He doesn't fit. He needs to be pinch run for. His bat is slow. But he turned into a really good clubhouse guy, which probably saved him as long as it did. But that being said, I think the really good clubhouse guy is the reason why he was sent out now, because if Joey Votto is on the horizon, you don't want a clubhouse divided. You cannot live in a clubhouse divided. By replacing Vogelback, a player favorite, with Votto, a fan favorite, and immediately, so there's a bridge, and that bridge has become Addison Barger, who is now here, has options, but if he plays well enough, they could decide what the move would be to bring Votto onto the roster, whether it's Ernie Clement, whether it's someone else, whether there's another injury on the horizon.
Yeah, well, so I just don't see it being Clement, because you do have some positional versatility there, and he's a right-handed hitter, whereas Horwitz and Barger are lefties. So if Votto's a factor, Barger with options, yeah. The other thing, and I know I just sort of poo-pooed my own point by pointing out that Clement is a right-handed hitter, but that's also the possible vulnerable spot for Justin Turner. If, you know, and he's done a little more lately, but if he doesn't carve out a role that truly addresses a need for this team, which is to say, if his bat doesn't become what it was last year. Now, he was a lefty masher last year for Boston. He had really good numbers in general, but particularly against left-handed pitching. If that doesn't come around for him, Griff, then maybe when it's Votto time, it's Turner. Otherwise, I would think it would be a left-handed hitter.
Yeah, I mean, right now as we speak, the DH spot seems to be Justin Turner and whoever needs a day off their feet defensively, like a Vlad or Springer, or, you know, anyone.
Catcher.
Yeah. No, but not in terms of the DH position. I wasn't even considering a second catcher, but somebody who needs a day off defensively. So that Bo or whoever, that would be the other DH to Turner. So Turner has a role at this point, but that, you know, if he doesn't produce, I think that could be in jeopardy as time goes on, because there's no future with this team for a guy like Justin Turner moving forward, and he's only signed through the end of the year.
Yeah, and I mean, Justin Turner's a great story in general if you're not familiar with him. I mean, a guy who, like Jose Bautista, found it late, right? He was Turner, kind of an afterthought with the New York Mets, went to Los Angeles, became their starting third baseman on those perennial playoff teams, did the big 4-year contracts, became beloved there, had a good year in Boston last year, is almost 40 now, and he's had a really nice career. All that said, Griff, I think this is his last major league contract. Like if he wants to play next year, he'll get a minor league deal with a spring training invite somewhere. That's probably where he's at now, and that's okay. He's almost 40.
That's a great comparison, though. That's a great, because two guys that struggled early on to find a spot and then did and became popular in the clubhouse, became leaders in the clubhouse, and produced with numbers for a long time. Yeah. So, that is a very solid comparison of the two. But
and
if we're not
Griff, third baseman, right? Jose.
Yeah. Yeah. But if we're gonna say that the Jays have moved beyond 2015 and 16 and it's a new era, then that would also explain why they don't need a guy like Justin Turner anymore. They need somebody with more versatility, maybe a left-handed hitter, but somebody who can do some of the little things. And I'm not just talking stealing bases. I'm talking starting, and allowing for a hit and run opportunity. And if a guy misses, you still have a chance to steal it back. But yeah, no, that era, the Justin Turner era, the Daniel Vogelbach era in baseball seems to be coming to an end.
Couple things I want to say, just observations. And again, it's a very small sample size. So this could blow up in my face in 3 weeks and everybody could be saying what, but I feel like I see something with Spencer Horwitz. I don't know exactly what that is yet, but when he steps into the batter's box, Griff, and I thought of this, actually, when I thought of it was that at bat with second and third, 2 outs after the IKF bunt and the Kiermaier strikeout. I'm watching the game and I'm thinking, this is the right guy in the batter's box right now to bail out this bad process.
Yeah.
He's a good at bat. He's a good at bat in the way Kevin Biggio couldn't be. Like Horwitz isn't going to take a dick shot fastball on the inner black of the plate and say, well, won my pitch, called third strike, and walk back. Like he has a good handle of the zone. He gets bat on baseball. Like I like what I see. It's very early, but there's something there.
Yeah, when I spoke to Ernie Clement about a month ago about the experience with the robo-ump and the automatic strike zone, and I said, it seems to me that you and Davis Schneider have come up and have an understanding of the strike zone that is an advantage over people from previous eras who have had to put up with terrible strike zones from bad umpires all the way through the lower minor leagues, don't understand the strike zone, come to AAA, and it's still an iffy strike zone. And in your head, you don't know. But you guys all know. The 4 guys that are up here now, you look at Spencer Horwitz when he takes one 6 inches off the plate, 3 inches off the plate, and it's called a strike. He'll glance back at the umpire, but he'll understand that this is the strike zone he's going to get. I better protect the plate. Kevin Biggio seemed to have in his head the strike zone, and he wouldn't swing, and he got punched out a lot, but he also got punched out on pitches in the zone. But Spencer Horwitz and those young guys, they've got such an uncanny knowledge of the strike zone for kids in their mid-20s. And that comes from 2 or 3 years of the robo-ump, of being able to question, a couple of calls, reviews that they can ask for. And I think it helps all of them tremendously. And it helps the Blue Jays moving forward to have those guys in the lineup. And I see what you see in Spencer Horwitz moving forward.
And the second thing, and I'm bringing it up now because it happened against a good opponent. I said this to you, and I think you agreed at the time back in April. There's something about Bowden Francis I like. And I think you've probably beat the drum for him louder than I have, Griff. But when I like his pitch mix, I like his off-speed stuff. He was dropping that curveball or that slider out of the strike zone, getting some swing and miss over the top of the baseball, playing off a fastball that isn't overpowering, but can appear overpowering when the off-speed stuff and the breaking stuff is working. And he had one of those really good bulk guy outings in Saturday's game. And it didn't start well for him this year. The fifth starter deal, the bad night in Houston, where as crazy as it sounds, he gave up a ton of home runs in that Houston game first week or the first Monday of the season. But like, there were a lot of good pitches mixed in. It was just that the really bad ones all got tonged like loudly. And so again, Horwitz on the offensive side, Bowden-Francis having some success and good results reinforces for me, because I so often question what I see or what I think I'm seeing, reinforces for me what we've discussed, which is there's something there.
Yeah, that's a beautiful segue into the next portion of our discussion, which is not only the injury to Jimmy Garcia, but also the fifth starter spot, which is Yariel Rodriguez has been throwing. I think he's made 8 AAA appearances. But so let's cut right to the.
Are you gonna bring up your text to me from yesterday when Jimmy went down? Jimmy's down. Jimmy's down.
No, but I will say that this might change the usage on Y-Rod.
Well, that was your text.
But okay. Well, I must have had a couple of left field brewery.
Okay. Well, then we'll wait to hear what you have to say, and I'll confirm whether that's what you texted.
The feeling is that with Swanson in Buffalo, and nobody knows how he's doing, with Jordan Romano out, and you're going to bring him back and immediately throw him into the closer role, and with now Jimmy Garcia sideline, and we don't know for how long, but it doesn't look good. That maybe Yariel Rodriguez should be considered as an 8th inning guy with Chad Green in the 9th inning role for the moment, and then see how that plays out. It's not like the bullpen has been locked down for the last month. They've turned 3-run leads into 1-run victories more than once. So maybe that would leave Bowden-Francis as a logical 4 or 5 inning. Let him roll through 5. Maybe he can get to 6 innings as a 5th starter, and then go from there with the bullpen, because I don't like the idea of Trevor Richards being just a bulk guy for that 5th day every 5 days. And I mean, they need him more often than that, especially with the back end of the bullpen looking like it is. And I don't think that Trevor Richards is a guy to pitch the 9th inning, but they need to find one in the meantime till Jordan Romano comes back. But they also need the 8th inning plus back-to-back games where they have a lead, which they're not going to make the postseason unless there are more than 5 or 6 of those occasions. So, yeah, let's discuss. What do you think?
Well, because your text said to me, why Rod in the 9th?
Oh, there you go.
When Jimmy went down. My first thought, because Garcia's been awesome this year. And, the worst thing you can do is bring some of your worst thoughts to the airwaves, or to the podcast waves, or whatever the hell we're calling it now. And so you and I danced around this a couple of months ago, Griff, when Jimmy got off to the great start that has really continued to this point. And I didn't predict doom, but we did express, man, like, he has added a couple of miles an hour to that fastball, and he has got some unbelievable movement on his. But now his pitches have always moved, but this year it was elite, and the results reflected that. And we said at the time, I remember saying, I just hope the arm holds up, because there's been a lot. And it might have been around the time of that Sunday night baseball game when Tyler Glasnow, who was not starting for the Dodgers that night, did a dugout interview with the ESPN Sunday Night Baseball crew during the game, one of the half innings. And he was talking about the pitching injuries. And of course, Glasnow was coming off his own Tommy John with the Rays before the trade to the Dodgers. And the spin rates and all of this, and it's kind of an epidemic now. And I worry, Griff, because right now what we know on Monday, June the 17th, early afternoon Eastern time, we're talking over the lunch hour here, is that it's elbow irritation. Well, that's worrisome. Let's hope it's an injection like Jordan Romano and then he comes back, as opposed to a Tommy John, Alek Manoah situation. But like again, it's a free agent year for Jimmy. Maybe willing to try some different things, having an amazing year, looking at another multi-year, well-paid contract because he's still early to mid-30s. And then, damn it, this happens. And I was worried about this. We touched on it, danced around it, but nobody wants to go on the air, and nobody should say, man, 2 months from now, he's going to be hurt throwing like this. But I worried about it, and I hate that it happened.
You have been saying that for months now, and it's not just the number of pitches that he's thrown and the frequency of his game appearances, but it's the high leverage. I mean, I think he left the first 11 inherited runners on base, and they weren't all easy situations. There was one that was bases loaded, nobody out, and he got out of it with 2 strikeouts and a pop-up. And there were others with less than 2 outs. So there's high leverage, high stress on each pitch. And like you said, it's a free agent year. We've never seen. I asked him the one day, I said, have you ever hit 100? Because he hit 99.6, which was rounded up to 100 at a game at Rogers Center. And he smiled and he said, no, never. And like he admits he was throwing harder than he ever has. You talk about the 98 with movement. The 98 with movement, like for a left-handed hitter, it just starts outside corner and moves off the plate by about 8 inches.
Unhittable.
He gets swings and misses out of it. So, we're not suggesting there was anything other than him really focusing on being the best Jimmy Garcia that he could be and letting it all out every day, every time he goes to the hill. And as you said, hopefully it's just an injection that's needed and some rest, some downtime, and that he can be back in a month or the same time frame as Jordan Romano's coming back.
Well, it's the whole thing, Griff. Like, he's a free agent. He's not old, but he's not young. And if it's a year because it's Tommy John, like it's late next year at this point if it's a Tommy John surgery. And that just buys into a guy's time. And then he's probably talking a 2-year contract with a low guarantee for the injured year and a bounce back year in 2026. Like, let's just hope for the best. I don't want to get too far ahead on this. It's just, and it sucks for the Jays because damn it, he's been good. And then they don't have Romano right now who's healing. And the injection, Griff, like, we're never going to sit here and speculate, but I'm not going to believe Jordan Romano comes back and is totally out of the woods.
Yeah.
Right? Until he finishes the year and healthy and whatever,
Yeah, so they need Eric Swanson to get it together, but they also have Chad Green up here. We're still worried about Tim Meza and his effectiveness against left and right-handed hitters. But, they've got 2 other left-handers that out of the bullpen that they're carrying because they're playing teams with a lot of left-handed hitters, right? Through Cleveland, Boston, and the Yankees. And so, yeah, they've got the bullpen set up the way they want, but they need one more guy, and they need to determine, in the absence of Jordan and Jimmy, who is going to be that 9th inning guy at the moment.
Yeah, it's just a reminder that your best laid plans change in a heartbeat, right?
Yeah,
Garcia, injuries crop up.
Garcia, I think it was 2017. He had 15 saves for the Marlins by July 4th. And he was shortly thereafter, he struggled after that. So that was July 4th. Then he struggled after that and was traded to the Astros and wasn't really effective. And so he has been there before. He has been a closer before. And he was set up the way he was throwing that his next contract would have been in the role of closer for somebody. And, because they can look back not just at this season, but at the 2017 season before July 4th. And, we're close to July 4th right now, a couple weeks away. And like maybe he was doing the same thing. He just didn't hit the IL back then, but his effectiveness dropped off later in the season.
Yeah, let's hope for the best for Jimmy Garcia, but specifically for his sake, but also for the Blue Jays' sake. He's such a big part of what they have been able to do on the good side of things this year. Before we put a wrap on this, Griff, the Boston Red Sox are coming in, and it's very rare. We know that the schedule changed last year, more balanced. You see everybody at least one series per year now, but it's very rare that it's this late into June and you haven't seen a divisional rival yet. But that is the case, and the Blue Jays will see a lot of Boston. They'll go to Fenway next week, over the next little bit. But Boston comes in, couple of games over 500. They've been hovering around 500 for a while now after a good start. They've got some pleasant performances from a pitching staff that I think a lot of people feel doesn't pass the smell test over the course of a long season. But they've got a lot of really good positional players, some left-handed hitters who can do damage. And you watched them play the Yankees on Sunday Night Baseball last night. And as you pointed out earlier, one of the things they love to do is run the bases.
Yeah, these are not your father's Red Sox. These guys stole 9 bases in a game last night on Sunday night against the Yankees, and they are now in top 5 in the major leagues in stolen bases. And that in itself presents a problem to the Blue Jays, who are 8-14 against top 6 teams in stolen bases in Major League Baseball. They don't I mean, anybody who's watched games on TV knows they don't handle the steal very well. And that could be in large part because of the pitching staff not holding runners on. I mean, you look at Gosman's windup, that could lead to stolen bases all the time. And it could be that the Red Sox found aggressiveness a couple of months before the Blue Jays have. But the fact is 8-14 against top stealing teams is not a good sign. It's not going to be an easy series. And they play them again at Fenway later on after they go to Cleveland. So it's an interesting time of the schedule. I think realistically, if the Jays get to the All-Star break, a couple of games on either side of 500, that they're still in a position that realistically they don't have to be sellers at the deadline. This is a tough portion of the schedule, 29 games that we pointed to a couple of weeks ago. And if they can be around 500, then they can make plans to have a good second half, which is why I think they might be buyers at the deadline.
It feels like we've been saying this for a while now, so it almost becomes redundant or cliched or silly. I do. This is a crucial series. You're at home against a divisional rival that, for all of your own fault, for all of your own faults, real or perceived, entering the season, specifically to do with the offensive potential of the lineup in general, you were expected to finish ahead of. Right now, Boston's ahead of the Blue Jays. So it is June. There's more than half a season worth of baseball to play. It's not life and death. A sweep would be bad. 2 out of 3 either way. No point in panicking. But Griff, like, you've got, these are the games you got to win. Like, they gotta leapfrog a team like Boston, because then there's one less team between them and the third wild card spot holding Minnesota Twins. Like, these are the sorts of, you know what I mean? Like,
you pointed out the fact that their pitching staff and people are questioning the sustainability of the surprising starting staff, especially. And I think that this starting staff has made some huge adjustments. You look at the numbers, and then the percentage of off-speed and breaking balls and changeups is much higher than it has been with these same pitchers in the past. So there's a new game plan. And to me, the first 70 games of the season were other teams needing to make adjustments to what they're now seeing out of these same pitchers that are in the Red Sox rotation. And that's where I feel it's not sustainable, because adjustments by hitters, adjustments by the other teams that they will be facing in the future to their pitching plans is going to bring this pitching staff back down to earth. And I still think the Blue Jays are better than the Red Sox, but like you said, they better start proving it, because they've got 6 games against them in the next 10 days.
And if the Red Sox pitching is vulnerable, pounce on it. Like, continue the offensive uptick that you had over the weekend, the 2 final games of the series against Cleveland, because, Griff, I also start to worry when comments that are pretty benign, but if you follow this team closely, definitely have meaning behind them, start to trickle out. And both Chris Bassett and Kevin Gausman, after their most recent starts, either said directly or hinted at, starters have to be awesome or we're not going to win.
Well, it's nice that they realize that, because fans have been realizing that all
season. They realize it, Griff, but the players recognize it before anybody else. But the fact that they start to nudge that out publicly, like,
yeah, well, as who was saying it, that this clubhouse doesn't lead to real team unity. So, team starting pitcher may be in one room at the far end of this new tremendous clubhouse, and the hitters may be, so it's not like all playing cribbage and hearts or whatever they play.
It's a shame together, though, Griff, because if the umbrella is run prevention, everybody's succeeding at it. The Blue Jays pitchers are preventing runs against, the offense is preventing runs for. It's just one big love
on that
run prevention.
On that observation, we might wrap it up.
Yeah. And it is an ill-timed joke after a pretty good Saturday, Sunday against Cleveland. But you got a train to catch. You're going into the game tonight. We do want to share, and probably the old radio host in me should know this better, should share this at the front end of the show, but we will include it in the description of this podcast. Griff and I intend to go live again, so it'll be our 3rd live postgame. Guaranteed win night. We're 2-0 so far. So the Jays really just need to win either tonight or tomorrow night to win the series, because Wednesday they're going to win, because Griff and I are 2-0 so far when we do live postgames after Blue Jays games. Jays have won both those games. So we're going to go live Wednesday night on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/@exitphilosophy. We also post the entirety of our Exit Philosophy podcast episodes on YouTube, so you can check that page out. Griffsthepitch.com is Griff's entire catalog of content, weekly multiple columns, a weekly MLB Power Rankings column, conversations with current and former Blue Jays, former Montreal Expos, and episodes of the Exit Philosophy podcast. Griffsthepitch.com. Throw Griff a subscription. He's sitting right there, but I'll speak for him. I know he'd appreciate it, and you would too, because you get great baseball content consistently throughout the season and in the off season. And with that, Griff, we will talk to you on Wednesday night live after the Blue Jays conclude their series with the Red Sox. And we, of course, will be back next Monday with a fresh new episode of Exit Philosophy.
Thanks, Scotty. Thanks, everyone, for listening.